All right, so my name's Andrew Leek. I'm a little different from the presenters you heard this morning. I do not have a university affiliation. I am a private contractor. Some of the grant work that I do is just having grown up on a farm and my dad being a farmer, liking to help our growers in any way I can. But the bulk of my business is collaborating with national and global collaborators on uh, research, contract research, small plot research. So I'm a little different in that capacity. I've been working with soybean growers for 6 years or so. I've got 3 or 4 people that work with me on and off. Jenna Whitmore is right up here in the front. If you want to find her afterwards, she's my full-time employee, so I rely on her for a lot of help and information. But I had a lot of different studies and sub-studies within the grants with the soybean growers this year. But what I really want to focus on is the cultivating of industry partnerships and to get some non-biased data to our growers in a third-party setting. So the data is not coming from one company or another company highlighting their product with maybe one check from another company. And we've been doing this for 3 years or so. There are articles in the book that you got handed out before on some of the work I've done in weed control over the last 5 years. I'm not going to actually talk about weed control today. They kind of told me to pick what I want to pick, and I went with more of the industry partnership stuff. All right, so some of the grants we had this year for the soybean growers is aid in plant health industry and the impact on yield. So we had 2 different studies in this grant. I think we had 6 collaborators in the AVA trial that had at least 1 submission across the industry, and in the plant health, I believe we were up to 10 or so that submitted entries into this study to compare their value-added products. Below that, you see my resistance management, water hemp, and giant ragweed in rotation. Again, all that information for the weed control studies can either be found in the book that you got, the main book you got today or yesterday, or you can go to my website, which will be up here in a little bit under the latest news tab, and we've got publications on each individual study that you can read at your own leisure. So at the bottom there, you can see the website, a little cut off, but it's Next Gen Ag without the E in next. You can just go into Google, type in that, bring up the website, go to the latest news tab, you can see publications I've written over the last 5 years for research grower studies that I've conducted and summarized for you. Today we're going to focus on these 2 studies because they were kind of new this year in some capacity. Last 2 years ago, we did them sort of in a strip demo setting. This year, we looked at them in 6 replications, yield data, more statistical power, getting back to the cold hard research component for me to be able to give a publication where we can actually tell significant differences if they do appear. So we'll start with the soybean value added and the product impact on yield. These are just some information on plant dates and applications. So companies have the opportunity to include an in-furrow if they so chose. Then we had an R1 growth stage application and an R3 growth stage application. These products included fertilizers, they included fungicides, they included some biologicals, and they included a lot of like amino acids or growth hormone products that are all trying to make the market in a fairly competitive setting the last 5 years, in my opinion. This is how the data this set lined up, so I know there's a fair amount of you in here that understand statistics and everything that goes with it. For those of you who maybe are less versed on statistics and the power of replication, we look at letters here to tell us the difference between LSD, which is a least significant difference. So you take the highest yielding treatment in the study and you subtract the LSD value at your confidence level, which in this case is 90% or alpha 0.1. That anything that falls within that, let's say 2.5 bushels, I think it's covered up here, so it's not actually there, but 2.5 bushels, that everything within 2.5 bushels of that top yielder is statistically the same. Meaning if you repeat that study 100 times, that 90 times out of 100, they might flip-flop. Now when you have statistical significance, which is the difference between the yellows and the non-yellows in this case, you're saying that if you repeat the study at 100 times, that 90 times out of 100, we'd expect one treatment that's statistically better this year to be statistically better nine times out of 10 the next year, just repeated. But in this study, we had a lot of different timings, a lot of different companies, a lot of different products. Again, some of the companies are covered up there, but everything in yellow is statistically similar. So in this study, we only really had the top yielders, which was 14 of the 26 entries, 25 entries. We had 2 untreated checks that we combined. And then everything below that was statistically different from the top yielder. But as you can see here, anything that's got a B in it is statistically similar to anything that's got a B up there as well. So these treatments down here that even though they have a B and they're not statistically significant to the very first one, are similar to the second one. So that's just kind of a breakout of how that went. So kind of to summarize what we found in this study is that the addition of, and this is one study in 1 year, which was a really dry year, from plant date to August 10th, we got a total of 2.2 inches over that 75 days and never more than 0.3 at a time. So we were very, very dry. So we were in a drought environment. The addition of multiple value-added products and application timings didn't appear to have a synergistic advantage in this case. Again, it might be a different reaction in an ideal environment where you get time and moisture and you're really optimizing that yield with your value-added products versus just trying to maintain that floor. So it would suggest that the addition of at least one value-added product from the data would be something to consider based on this data. But whether or not a second product, so maybe putting it in furrow and then coming back with an R1 added product, may or may not benefit you. You get a wetter environment, you get increased funguses, then you're going to get a lot more out of that value-added fungicide at R1 or R3 than you maybe wouldn't have seen out here in a drought scenario. In a year of significant abiotic stress like drought, the addition of a second value-added product may be cost-effective. We hope to get funding to do something similar for this next year and maybe see it in a different environment and maybe get different results that would show a synergistic effect by adding multiple products. That's basically what that last bullet says. Then the other one I want to touch on is aphids. So we sprayed at 160 aphids per plant, which I know isn't quite economic threshold, but in research, when that pest is there, you go out and get it because you don't want to miss it. So we sprayed the aphid trial, and this is very similar in the industry setup. So you've got all our different collaborators with entries. And I really liked this trial this year. We got a really good aphid infestation, and we got a determination of basically a 50% resistant population, the group 3As in our area. And you really saw the products tier out based on that resistance. So everything in what I'm calling the tier 1, there's the yield data over there, which is statistically similar to the top yielding, and the counts we got on average. And then you kind of had that tier 2, which is your group 3A products. It's not saying these products are bad products and they don't have a place. Don't take it that way. We just have a resistant population. So using the pyrethroid in a resistant population at a frequency of 50% did some damage, but again, you're resistant. And then, as it should, which doesn't always happen in research, scientists in the room know that, but the untreated check actually ended up where it was supposed to end up. And I think down here, I think it's like 47.2 or something. I can't quite see under there, but it did have the highest aphid counts and the lowest yield. This graph I just drew up here based on our data, just to show that resistance is still out there. We had a correlation, a strong negative correlation with the increasing aphid population to decreasing yield. So that runs on a scale of -1 to +1, and the closer you are to either spectrum tells you how strong the correlation is. So it's not a -0.9 or anything, but a -0.778 is pretty good correlation. So the importance of aphid control, timely control of aphids is critical. So in summary, one product, one good product can might cost you 13 or might cost you a yield difference of 3.5 to 7.7 bushels if you're not using the right product or you're not putting any products on and you've got an economic infestation, and that can equate that $13 soybeans to $45 to $100 loss. So just being really aware as to what your aphid populations are like. Do you have resistance? Have you had resistance? Talk to your elevators, your crop consultants, and just make sure that it's not always, well, that's the cheapest one on the market and it'll do the job, but knowing, what the group is, what the active is, and what product you should be putting on your field in your region with your aphid populations, because yield loss can be pretty significant compared to the untreated check. Again, I'm not going to talk about the weed stuff, but we did water hemp and giant ragweed research and resistant populations for 2 years now in both corn and soybean. Same thing, industry partners had an opportunity to submit 2 entries in each of those studies. And those publications are on my website under the latest news tab, so please take a look at those later. For 2024, we're going to do plant health like we did this last year. We've already got new entries in our plant health study. We've got some companies that currently have earmarked some experimentals that are hopefully get registered by the new year. So some of the products you might be seeing for the first time in a public data set, if these grants are funded. We're going to do aphid and plant health like we did last year, and we're going to add white mold to the fold. We've got a good white mold place last year and the year before, so we're going to give that a go. There's another product in the white mold that's waiting on registration by next spring. That might be one of the first times you see that product as well through this work if it's funded. And we're working a little bit with the corn growers as well. I would just like to touch with an overall discussion on this cultivating partnerships in the industry. So all these partnerships that I work with are companies that work with me in my business. And this gives me a really great opportunity to extend an olive branch to them as a collaborator and say, listen, I've got this really great opportunity where I can help the soybean growers in the state of Minnesota with the use of their checkout dollars to get showcase trials for them where they can look at non-biased, multiple replicated trials with summaries. And they've got dollars set aside and they can actually fund this. And the collaborators that I work with are grateful for those opportunities because they get a chance to showcase their products against industry standards in a very non-biased environment. Sometimes their products perform, sometimes they don't. But they understand that data is public, that grant is publicly funded, and that data is going to be published. And it's been a really good win-win-win for the soybean growers, I hope soybean growers find value in this. Farmers I've talked to appreciate seeing this data. For myself, as it pays Jenna's salary every now and then the industry partners appreciate the opportunity to get some entries that they don't necessarily have to pull out their research budgets, and an opportunity to showcase against the industry standards that are out there. These are the companies we worked with last year, companies that we work with next year.